Helldivers 2 just launched a patch that sent player numbers soaring in Steam, but it is not just Steam. There is a new wave of fresh Xbox meat, which now means there's over 500,000 free thinkers out there defending democracy. Doesn't that feel nice? But here's the thing. It's Helldivers, chaos reigns, and like all good Helldivers news, there's also been a pretty large spike in negative reviews. So yes, they've absolutely done it again. We're getting both the good and the bad, and it's all the same big story of an incredible game that just keeps struggling with audience expectations and having a few rough landings with their patches. But the CEO Shams Jorjani says he's got a plan to fix this, and in his own words, with the Xbox release behind us, we'll be able to take a much better stab at it. Like a double stab with a bigger knife. Yeah, sounds good. Now, do you remember what it was like playing Helldivers 2, trying to be better but not having learned it deeply? Basically the skill gap between extreme and Helldive difficulty. Well, back in the day, that's kind of what coding was like when I was just learning with lectures and textbooks at university. But the good news is today's sponsor, Boot.dev, is both the best way to learn backend development, and also one that is made specifically for you and me, because it's structured like a role-playing game, and it's got soul, it's got the sauce. Hell, the founder Lane hit me up years ago when they were starting because he's also a WoW player. And back then they were new, but now they've got over 750,000 students who have done over 33.7 million lessons, which is kind of wild. Now, Boot is all about learning back-end development from the fundamentals right through to advanced career-focused training. You'll be doing personal projects, portfolio pieces, and fun things like making a real Pokedex, but, you know, not some little front-end mock-up, like a real one that works server-client. But here's what matters, right? Knowing the real fundamentals. That's something that maybe the new wave of untrained vibe coders doesn't often fully have, often to funny and security nightmare-related results. Though I love the energy, and Boot's the way to back that energy up with the fundamentals, which, by the way, here will be in either TypeScript or Go, all in a content-packed, well-designed and motivating structure that actually has soul. Boot is truly fantastic, and you'll get 25% off your first purchase at boot.dev/Bellular News. And if you're not happy, they'll refund you on the spot with a 30-day money-back guarantee. Plus, you can go and sample all their course stuff literally for free. So if actually learning how to code and to engineer is something you're excited by, just go check them out because they're awesome. First, let's get oriented with the story. This time last year, Helldivers was only just starting to climb out of the funk, where players were just sick of patches that didn't let them play their way. Basically, at the time, Arrowhead were very much living by their motto, a game for everyone is a game for no one. But that motto was kind of a little bit broken, because people were playing Helldivers because they wanted a power fantasy. For the developers, well, they were also trying to make a satirical, tactical shooter, and bridging the gap between the two ended up being a problem. It was not a game for everyone, and that was the causing friction. But a month later, everything changed. Arrowhead overhauled all of it, and this is what we called the Buff Divers campaign. It was 60 days of balance patches that basically just aimed to deliver power fantasy. So, they did that. They fixed things up. And then came the narrative rebuild. That had ongoing stories like the Jet Brigade and, of course, the Democratic Superstation. But this is Helldivers that we're talking about, so obviously the monkey's paw curled, because Christmas brought quite the stumble. They did a Killzone collaboration that had FOMO-powered monetization. It was really bad. They quickly reversed it, and after that, it's actually been pretty good. Nearly nothing but success. We had the Illuminate returning, region lock players were able to come back, the battle for Super Earth happened, but old wounds did actually remain. And as this new update drops, some players are worrying that things haven't completely changed at Arrowhead. But before we get to the salt, first, we've got to talk about something almost unimaginable a year ago, and, well, why this whole thing started. PlayStation's overall live service plan really seems to have gone off the rails, and even just before doing this video, we saw lots of rough-looking news, both with Bungie and also Fairgame. So it's not really surprising that they'd want to get their live services that are working, like this one, out to more places. So Xbox then. Xbox owners have been begging for this since launch. Even Phil Spencer questioned the exclusivity. He said he was not exactly sure who it helps, and the demand was real, and here's proof of that demand. Helldivers 2 sold faster on Xbox than it did on PS5 at launch. According to Alina Analytics, 6 days after launch, they had moved just under 1 million copies on Xbox, 926,000, and that compares to the PS5 launch, which was 633,000 within the same time frame. So yeah, that snowball momentum effect is absolutely the case. Now what's interesting is that a lot of fans are thanking Arrowhead for bringing it over, but according to Shams Jorjani, who is the CEO, quote, "It was all PlayStation." Which, you know, in the broader context of PlayStation Live services falling off the rails, does make a lot of sense. They presumably could not just turn down having way more paying players. But another thing happened. A war bond that dropped alongside the Xbox release, and that, we do know, was Arrowhead's baby. Essentially, they had learned from the Killzone debacle, and this time, what they did is they released a slightly more expensive legendary war bond without the FOMO, and I will admit to you, I did buy it. Basically, it's Halo 3 ODST, and it is done so goddamn well. The gear and the weapons absolutely nail the fantasy, and when you actually look at the details, even things like the spent cartridges, the Bungie animations in first person being replicated, down to whenever you go first person on the AR, it just looks like it's Halo. It's an absolute labor of love, and we now know it's one that Arrowhead pitched directly to Halo Studios and Xbox during port development. Now, in terms of numbers, even before the big patch launched, the concurrent player counts hit a new record with over 500,000 people, which does make a lot of sense. All this fresh meat is here, and, well, us vets need to teach them how to defend democracy. But then the patch happened, and that's why there's quite a few negative reviews. So let's talk about that. It wouldn't be a Helldivers report without first checking in on the Steam reviews. But to be clear, we're not where we were beforehand. Over the last 30 days, across all languages, they're at 79% positive. Most people are having a great time with the new Warbond, the new features, the new enemies, the new maps, even though, well, one of those enemies does have people a little frustrated. But let's take a look at the spike of negative reviews to work out what's happening here. Because we do see that some players do not like this patch's direction. They're upset about specific enemies needing specific weapons. If that seems familiar to you, yeah, we kind of were here last year. A lot of people seem to hate the Dragon Roach implementation as well, but then there's the bigger problems, because a sizable and vocal minority can't even play the game. And the right to be vocal, they should be able to. Basically, we're talking crashes, sound problems, comms bugs, latency issues where hosts are actually more vulnerable to burrowing enemies, so that's lovely. Things like extraction shuttles being embedded in geometry. That happened to me 2 nights ago as an example, and that's just a sample of the issues. And I think it's kind of obvious why this sort of thing happens. Helldivers is a big sandbox game. It's all about systems, and systems often interact in unexpected ways, but obviously to the community, this reminds them of a very bad time, and that means that people are a little bit worried. And also, making it a little worse, the PC version now needs more than 135 gigabytes of storage. That's a hell of a lot, and to some, file verification and reinstallation have become significant roadblocks. So with all that going on, what's the most popular post on the Helldivers subreddit this week? It's a very simple question. Would you prefer 2 months with no content if it meant a buff diver style performance fix? So if that's shooting to the top of the subreddit, yeah, it does kind of show what players want. And Arrowhead clearly know about these concerns, so much so that they're very happy to talk about them. But obviously, talking about them and fixing them are very different things. It might get them into hot water sometimes, but it is nice that this dev team are active in Discord. So the CEO has spent days talking to people in the Discord, directly addressing the complaints, saying basically that they take this seriously. And that's kind of quantifiable because they had a patch ready within 48 hours of the update, which was ahead of schedule. That's pretty good. It addressed some of the complaints that I've mentioned here, but not everything, and obviously players do want more. As for actually delivering, well, remember the timeline at the start of this video? This is a team that hasn't really stopped for breath, and even with Sweden's mandated summer holidays, releases have been constant. It's been a pretty absurd 1.5 years of non-stop content, and that's actually why Jorjani's Discord message, particularly this one, hits hard. Quote, "The technical debt is crippling." Yeah, when you have a sandbox game, heavily systems-driven one, and you're continually adding things and changing things, basically entropy and chaos just seep their way in unless you're very, very careful. And of course, being careful takes time, and that's always, well, it's always a trade-off, and players want exciting new content. But his next words are the real interesting part. With the Xbox release behind us, we'll be able to take a much better stab at it, like a double stab with a bigger knife. So, players want a Buff Divers style sprint for performance, and it seems that's some of what they'll want to deliver, but there is a bit of a problem. Technical changes across 3 platforms, so PlayStation, Xbox, PC, that is harder than doing balance tweaks, right? Especially when you're building one of those platforms. Especially so, in addition to all that content, they were also building the Xbox stuff. Of course, now that the Xbox port is done, they can take stock. And yes, Jorjani rightfully tells people that not everyone can work on bug fixes. They do not have people working in content. But that's actually where there could be some good news, because another thing has changed. The Dust Devils Warbond was co-developed with Wushu Studios. Now, they're a live service team. They've worked in other games like Baldur's Gate 3 and Forza Horizon 5, so pretty good track record. And it seems that what this did was free Arrowhead up to work on the ODST Warbond, which does kind of all add up. Less pressure from big external requirements, more focus on day-to-day problems. Now, in an ideal world, this does mean, well, the friction points that players have actually being solved. At least in theory, because, well, yes, nothing's easy, but also, whenever you have a massive surge of new players, you will want to have a good content pipeline to keep them going. You don't want it to be a flash in the pan. And the whole thing that spooked people about Helldivers with all of its post-launch drama was the idea that it could be a flash in the pan. So they will have a lot of pressures to do things that monetize, which is going to mean more warbonds, more content, all whilst also making all of the Buff Divers style improvements to the game and also the technical fixes, but doing those technical fixes in the context of loads and loads of new players on a new platform. And just about all of the time, the more that you add scale, just in terms of player count, the more things can fall over. And not even in ways that the average player may expect. Some part of their server infrastructure could fall over. That could then have, knock-on effect on lots of other things. Basically, live service is hard, and as much as I want to say, oh wow, this looks fantastic, it seems they've got a robust plan, the deck is clear, they can fix up the game. Again, I just think about incentives, I think about pressure that could potentially come from PlayStation, and the inherent problems of scale, and I don't want to sell you guys down the river, even though undoubtedly, we are hearing some good stuff. So where are we at? Well, it's clear that Helldivers' success has came with a cost. Lots of profit, lots of praise, but also an immense amount of pressure from an audience that is orders of magnitude bigger than expected. That was absolutely the case for this game's launch. It may also be the case for the Xbox launch, because that thing has went absolutely incredibly for them. And look, for the most part, this team has risen to the challenge. We're only talking about a minority who want to play that can't because of the technical issues, which I suppose is a sign of progress, but vocal minorities do shape opinions, and it's pretty easy, especially when you look really powerful and look like an incumbent, to just have the narrative slip through your fingers like sand, because those who are loudest shape conversations, and those conversations can shape people's reality. And Arrowhead clearly knows this. I mean, when you see the CEO running community management, just sitting there in the Discord doing all he can, well, you know how seriously they take this risk. And while it may be frustrating, it may be tiring, ultimately, that communication is far easier than actually delivering the fixes. But at least there is some good news. They're now in a fairly stable position. Fans absolutely do seem to enjoy the game. Of course, we've got to remind ourselves that this Xbox port probably wasn't just turned over super quickly in a month or two. So likely they will have more staff freed up for content, bug fixes, and balance and all of that stuff. And that ultimately means this may be Arrowhead's best chance to pay down that technical debt. I certainly hope it is, and I can at least say that, look, I can go around with a Halo assault rifle in first person, and it kind of looks like I'm John Halo, and that does make me happy, because I'm actually pretty simple. Let me know what time you've been having, and if you want to see how the UK's laws impacting Steam, oh boy, check out this video next. It's not great, but it is entertaining.